Brian Kinter, everybody.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. You know, I come to these events and I look around and, you know, I sit and I see the heartache, the pain, the grief, but I see the hope. I see the inspirations. I see the people's desires. You know, 11 years ago, my children were taken from me on an allegation. And we took that allegation, and I was saying, Lord, what's it supposed to be in our lives? What are we supposed to be doing here? How do these things happen? And yet the Bible tells us it is those lies. It's those little things. And in the old days, when somebody told a lie and it caused deception or they did something to another, that individual was shunned. I'm here to tell you today that we're going to begin a process of shunning the judiciary. In just a couple of weeks, I'm going to be going forward and I'm going to be personally suing all 9 U.S. Supreme Court justices. Now, just so that everyone here knows, is that, you know, and I think all of us here have been down that road. When you go into a court and you have your attorneys, you have the guardian ad litems, and you never realize until you get in thick that all of them are on the same team. They just forgot to tell you. And you sit there and you look, is it okay for me to take this off?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It's for them to take, they're all on the same team. And you begin to look at this and you're saying, why? The reason why is because they can. They've done it repeatedly over the years. And what we're saying is that we have a newfound hope. Our hope isn't in any one particular individual. Our hope is in Christ Jesus. When I had taken and started on my journey, I had over 100 attorneys. Over 100 attorneys. That all of them had said, Brian, you will go to jail. Brian, you can't do this. Brian, you can't do that. And the Lord continually pressed upon my heart that I had to go forward. March 27th, 2012, we made history when we were the first ones to bring the U.S. Marshals in and shut down an entire judicial court system. And as we go forward in this process, we've met so many wonderful people that have been inflicted by the overreach of our judiciary. Our children are not for sale. Our children are not mere commodities that the state wants to utilize to balance their books. Our children are God-given. There is no one, and I'm going to tell you all here and now, that there is no one that has more power, more authority than the parents of that child. And I say that it is time that we unite in our voices and we begin to make a demand upon the judiciary that we're coming. And as we're coming, take notice that we're growing in number. There's more and more and more. Because one of the greatest tricks of the devil is that he beats you into submission to adapt to his ideology because of fear. The court operates in a fear Gestapo. They're just a grouping of thugs. But when we go forward, we're not going out there as vigilantes, and we're not going to be out there and woe is me. Whatever they deliver, we are going to rise above. When you take and you hurt one of my brothers, you hurt one of my sisters, you hurt all of us. And the day has come when as the court has to be taken to court. We have to put the court on notice that you haven't done your jobs. The other day I had the good fortune and pleasure of being able to be at a friend of mine, Mr. John Gentry's home. And as I was sitting there and I was praying, And the Lord was saying, here's where it's at. John has some words for you. And I sat there and I was listening, and John said, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going to the U.S. Supreme Court because our state courts are corrupt, because you're corrupt. Let's take the fight right to the head of the snake. We're not going to take and continue this facade of going in and let's combat on the state court issues, because the state courts are in doing what they're doing because the U.S. Supreme Court has allowed it to transpire. When I took my case before the U.S. Supreme Court, I was scheduled for oral arguments on July 15th, 2013. There had never been a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court for oral arguments since 1978. That's the last time an individual was allowed access to the court to have oral arguments. And you sit there and you say, well, wait a minute. The United States Supreme Court had established in the FCC versus the AT&T case that monopolies are illegal. And yet we have a monopoly called the American Bar Association, where all of these folks, I have to pay the extortion, I have to pay the ransom, I have to pay the king's price in order for me to be able to give the illusions of justice, because it's not justice. I tell every one of these folks, and they say, Brian, with you it's about money, and it is. Because I say each and every single one of you folks out there have been damaged. You've been hurt, you've been violated. And our judicial process allows us the opportunity to seek remedy of redresses for our grievances. The problem is that the court doesn't see it that way. The court started a mundane minutia sandwich where they've taken and they've handed people 2 pieces of bread with fecal matter between it and tell them that you're going to accept it. If it's a shit sandwich, it's a shit sandwich. We're going to begin to stand up and we're going to tell these judges that we're coming for your asses. We don't believe that you folks, there's some of them that are ignorant and don't know any better, that just go along with the process because they think that this is the way it's supposed to be done. But there's some that do not have the possibility or probability of redemption. They're reprobates. And we have to look at ourselves, because as a society we have sat on the sidelines and we've watched the continued proliferation of our rights being slowly eroded, one by one, because that was your child. And I think each and every single person here today was just as I was. We were all foolish, we were all naive, and we were all ignorant. Because we all believed that when you went to the court, as long as you told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, you couldn't help but come out okay. But then as you begin to embark upon the journey, you discover that they don't care about the truth. Now the court doesn't even just not operate in the truth. The court fabricates evidence. They conceal evidence. The court runs one of the largest, most well-funded criminal racketeering organizations anywhere in the United States of America, is in our halls of justice. The Bible tells me is that these things are they're hidden, and yet they're right in the open for all. But it's the obscurities of the rules that they utilize, that they take and they say, well, you can't come to court because of this rule and that rule. So we'll jump back to when as I was scheduled for the oral arguments. 2 days prior to me being able to go to the U.S. Supreme Court to plead my case, they adopted Rule 28.8. If you go to the U.S. Supreme Court and you go down there and you talk with them, they say, this is the Brian Kinter rule. No pro se litigant, that means not one of us here can take our case before the U.S. Supreme Court without paying the king's ransom to have a bunch of attorneys come in and represent you. I don't know about anybody else here, but there was a little thing called due process. I believe that's a violation of my God-given, constitutionally protected, unalienable rights. I don't believe that you have the power to beat me into submission, to adapt to your ideology, that I have to conform to ignorance. Because that's exactly what it is. It's ignorance. It's ignorance that a child would be removed from their home predicated upon an allegation with no substance of abuse to back it up. How the state takes and they fabricate it in its all ambiguous language that we want to write so that we give the illusion of justice with no evidence to substantiate the claim. In order for you to have justice, it has to be predicated upon truth. Well, if the whole damn thing is predicated upon a fraud, then there is no truth. So I encourage everyone to take and follow what's being done. You know, a couple of years ago, the Lord gave me a revelation to take and establish an organization called the JAM, the Judicial Accountability Movement. Me, I had a different concept in my mind in the flesh because I was coming and I was going to jam it right back up your you-know-what because of what you folks had done to me and what you'd done to my children. And the other night, I had the Lord deliver a message through another individual, and they said, the jam is Jesus always moving. If we're truly going to be ambassadors for Christ, that means that we walk with His authority. We walk with His power, and we walk with His might. Hallelujah, sister. Hallelujah. You know, and I tell people that words will only go so far. It's time for action. So in the upcoming days, after we get this thing filed, and Mr. Gentry has done some phenomenal work to narrow down my learning process for what I have to do. As we go forward, we're hopeful that this event here will multiply by the thousands. Because when we get into Washington, D.C., we're not coming in and making requests or coming with our hats in our hands and begging you. We're putting you all on notice. We're putting the entire judicial system on notice that we're not blind to what's happening. We are either going to usher in change or we are going to usher in the next Holocaust. Because right now, the proliferation of abuse that's being delivered at the hands of the judiciary to make money off the backs of our children is just, it defies logic. It defies human compassion. It defines all elements of life. But each and every single one of you here today came for the same purpose. It was the love of your child, or your grandchild, or your niece, your nephew, the neighbor's child, but it was that love. It's my prayer today that there would be an outpouring of love clear across the land, that people would be able to see that we're not out here crying because of what you've done to us. We're crying because of what you're doing to our children. And I just want to encourage everyone today to stay for the entire event. Because tonight we're going to have a candlelight vigil if we get some candles, huh, Ted? We had some folks that were supposed to show up with the candles. If not, we'll run to get some. But in the closing today, I won't do a whole lot of talking until tonight. But I want everyone to stick around because there's a lot going to be happening. Ted, I think you're the one now to run the show, you know, and pull this thing together. And as we go forward, you know, I'm going to have a woman today, and I'm going to grant her, we are, I hope, a lot of time, and that is a young lady by the name of Lotus Justice. Lotus has been with me through the years. We've shared a lot of pain, a lot of tears, a lot of anguish, because we both have the same heart, and that is to see change. Because We don't want to see our children. My son, he takes and he's 14 years of age, and his favorite song is from Mike and the Mechanics there, The Living Years. And he's saying, Dad, what are you going to do to bring about a change? Because we do inherit what it is that our fathers had done before us. When I speak and I say fathers, I think everyone in this group knows that that's inclusive of all the mothers. Of all the mothers, of all the grandparents, of everyone. But what it is it's the heart. It's the heart of the matter. We have to get back to the heart of the matter, and I think that now that we have President Trump in office, we're not here for a political debate, but I think that we have seen sweeping changes. I fully anticipate that we're going to see a whole lot more. We are pressing Congress to put in an oversight committee to look at the proliferation of abuse that's being delivered at the hands of the judiciary. And we believe that it's time to start rising up and prosecuting crooked judges. Okay? When you have the judiciary, my daughter and my children on May 15th, 2008 was taken from me and my rights were completely terminated. I went home that night and I fell to my knees. Okay? Because I was saying, how could you take my children? So I pressed the court and I said, why are you taking my children? It was predicated upon what the children said during the in-chamber conference. But what did the children say? We're not under an obligation or a responsibility, Mr. Kinter, to tell you. Wow, that was an eye-opener. I went into court the next day and I said I want to file for a motion to have that decision overturned. The clerk sat there and she said, Mr. Kinter, your rights, you're terminated. And I said, by whose authority? By whose authority? A judge is predicated on an allegation where there's no way for me to validate and verify what it was that was allegedly said in this. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but like I told her, unless this is communist China, I believe that somebody's damn well going to give me an explanation how you terminated my rights. As the years toiled and I would be able to see my children, I had that decision overturned. I was able to get back with my children. I began to discover that guess what? When they took my children into this in-chamber conference, the only question that they asked my children was, do you like McDonald's? Magistrate Lancaster sent the bailiff to McDonald's, left my children sitting in a room for an hour and a half, eating McDonald's. I cried. Because I was thinking, you have one person that is so filled up with hatred, with anger, with bitterness, with her own personal hell and torment that she's inflicted with, that she has to unleash that hell and torment on others. And my grandmother, she used to say to me, is that misery loves company. Hallelujah? Hallelujah. Because when we're hurting, we have a tendency to hurt others. So I tell people, listen, let's not hurt one another. Let's come alongside of those. Even when we make mistakes, even when we fall short, we stand and we say, I still love you. Amen. You know, we're going to fight because our fight is their fight. And if we don't take and bring about the change now, then the question's when. And if not us, then whom? We've been given a charge. I'm asking each and every single one of you here today to stay with us as we boldly go forth to bring about that change. Because the time is now. And it's back to Ted, I think. Ted, we're going to take and kick off this event. And, you know, today there's a few that we had a list here of people that were going to speak. But I want to tell everybody is that all of our stories are the same. Just a little bit different twist. But we all have been oppressed by the very system that was designed to ensure against it. And today, we're going to hear those stories. We're going to have the people, and I hope that it pierces your soul to see the striking theme, whereas it establishes a pattern, the policies, and the procedures that illuminate the systematic pattern, which is a RICO violation. Because I'm saying the court runs one of the largest, most well-funded, well-organized racketeering organizations. Some of them in there are unwilling accomplices. Some of them know damn well what they're doing. So today, all of the people that get an opportunity to speak, and I hope it's every one of you, and if it's not up here on this stage, I hope it's to me personally. Because I have collected a database over the years of over 2,000 cases across the nation that are all the same. So when the court's own rulings clearly establish that it is the court that has been the one that has been the transgressor, the one that has been coming in and being the abuser, the one that has beaten you and battered you and done these things, we have to stand up and we have to say it is time that we bring an account. I'm asking all here today to hold me accountable, because it starts here. If I fall short for any one of you, I expect that you come and you say, Brian, you need to be held accountable. You've done this. Brian, I see you going down the wrong path. Brian, I'm not sure that this is going to work in the court process unless you can give me a reasonably intelligent, articulate argument as to why. I'm probably going to follow my heart. Because in 2012, I impaneled a team of 13 attorneys from across the nation. And I said, I want to file suit against the judge in a federal tort claim action. The court, they said, or the attorneys, they said, we'll assist you, but we're not signing off, because if we do, it will be the end of our careers. We will all simply lose our law license. Well, on March 27th, 2012, when the U.S. Marshals come in, as soon as the judge was served, and now I have accused the judge of aiding and abetting in parental alienation. You have systematically turned a blind eye, because I wasn't just accused one time of abuse. My daughter was 7 years of age. 21 minutes after I had filed for custody of my children, the mother took my daughter in and made an allegation that I had touched my daughter's butt inappropriately. The next allegation, when I was cleared of that charge, was that I had put my hand down my daughter's pants and stuck my finger in my daughter's vagina. The next allegation was that I had asked my daughter to perform oral sex. The next allegation was that I asked my daughter to have sexual relationships with 2 other men. The next allegation was that I had taken my penis and I had rubbed it against my daughter's anus. And every one of these times, the allegations would become prolifically worse. And you're sitting there and you're saying, wow, how can the judge see this mundane ignorance and allow it to continue to go forward? And the judge says all of the allegations are one and the same, because they're sexual in nature. And I press the court, I say, we all agree that child abuse is a criminal offense. I want you to give me a criminal court. I want you to put me in a criminal court in front of a jury of my peers and allow them to see whether or not they're going to buy into this mundane madness and ignorance. Because every time that I would get my child, there would be another allegation. And each time it would get progressively worse. So the judge, in all of her infinite wisdom, in 2011, she took and she had suspended all of my access to my children until we could have a finding of an investigation that had already been closed out back in September. Do you understand? So I tell people, simply because the court writes fiction as though it's fact doesn't make that it's fact. It just means that it's their writing. What the Bible tells me is that everything seems right till someone else comes along and tells the other side of the story. And I tell people, listen, we're not here. One thing that I do is I say, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Let us not embellish upon our cases, and let us not diminish from our cases. Just tell the facts. You know, there was a young woman by the name of Shannon Baskins. Shannon Baskin is now in glory. Hallelujah. Amen. Shannon Baskins and I would spend a number of nights on the phone in tears. And today, in closing, we're going to read you some of the things that was written for some of the other folks that have been going through this hell. But here's the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We don't have to remain in that hell. He is our hope. He is our inspiration. And I tell everyone, listen, we are no longer, when Christ went to the cross, he did so to set the captives free. And that's what we're about. He assembled this team because you all are powerful. You're all powerful. And he's saying it's time for us to march into the depths of hell and set the captives free. The greatest hell that there is in the United States of America is the hell of the juvenile domestic relations courts. That is by hands down the greatest. I often sit and I wonder why it is that the Lord has put me, because we sit on the Innocence Project, the NSMB board, we sit on the Forger Project, the Law Project, all these different groups, and you gain so much information. The Innocence Project come out and established that 78% of the American people have been adversely affected by our judicial process. And I argued that no, it's not 78%, it's 100%. Because they have found a way to take Title IV funding and utilize it, which is actually robbing our elderly, depriving them of having an increase in their funding, being able to survive, so that we can continually build new prisons, so that we can have a pipeline, because we're going to break down the family unit, which is the basic fundamental building block of all of society. So when I take and I look back and I see the losses that I have, I've also had some gains. Because I've gained family clear across this nation. There's not a state that I can't go to where I don't have a home that I can call my own. Because I have the people, like John Gentry, that is committed to the cause. And that's what we all need to do. We need to be able to make a pact here today that it is our sacred honor that we will never stop and we will never cease our efforts until our United States of America judicial system gives an account and begins the process of prosecuting crooked judges, prosecuting these guardian items that take and just bill you. In 2013, when we were in court, the magistrate, or the Judge Reisinger, we became such a hot potato that she transferred my case to another court. When she transferred that case, we went into a court because my daughter wanted to come live with me. I was in front of a judge there with my ex, with my daughter, and we had a court hearing that lasted 7 minutes. The first time in front of this other judge in a different court in a different county, and they asked my daughter, "Why do you want to live with your father?" She began to cry. And she said, "I'm just tired of living the lie." And that's all it is. It's just a lie. We should be wrapping our arms around each and every single one of us. We should be embracing one another, and we should be saying, "Listen, let it not be me. Let me not bring disgrace to anyone else in this organization. Let me do a self-examination," and I would ask that of each and every single one of us here, to do a self-examination and saying, how do we collectively move forward to make the demands that we know are necessary to be able to fan the flames so that we can ignite a brush fire across the nation. A little while ago, when we had the shooting down there for the cruise boy in Florida, the next thing you know is that we have the youth that taken in just a matter of hours. A matter of hours. We're not talking days, weeks, or months. We're talking in a matter of hours. They put a thing together whereas all of these children were walking out of the schools because of the violence. And they're saying, we don't want to get shot. We need to have that type of revolution here in our movement. We need to get the people to, every day, everywhere you go, you talk. And you tell people about what's happening with our judicial system. How they have systematically robbed us, how they've stolen from us, how they've taken something that is irreplaceable. It is your God-given responsibility. It's mine. But when we started this process, I used to think before, there was a fellow up in Urbana, Ohio, and his name is Mike Current. Mike Current's wife used to work for me. Mike Current, he came, he needed to borrow money to pay for an attorney because he was going to prison. He was going to prison because he had been accused of sexually abusing his children. Stepchildren, I should say. Come to find out, Mike went to prison because I was saying no, he had been found guilty. And I was foolish and naive because I thought that they had taken in, that he was allowed to present his evidence. He wasn't. They suppressed it. They only allow in what they want to allow in. We set the stage by fabricating whatever it is that we want to fabricate. We lie on the record, and we just turn a blind eye to it. When I took and I had the opportunity to sit and talk with Mike's daughter, she began to cry. And every time that I tell the story, it makes me weep because she was saying she was mad at him. She was mad at him. And we go back around full circle sometimes because hurting people hurt people. So she was mad, so she told a lie. Another person took that lie, and they used that lie to send a man to prison. Hey. My current, because of my shame, because of my guilt, because I hadn't come along and helped my brother when he was truly innocent, because I thought that he was guilty because the court found him guilty. And once as I had embarked upon my own, I began to discover That could have been me. That could have been me that was sitting in prison all those years for a crime that I never committed. So I've made a determination from this day till the day when the Lord calls me home. I'm going to spend every day fighting this thing called judicial tyranny. We will now define the lines between judicial abuse and judicial discretion, because there has to be an intersecting point. They used to take innocent African Americans out and lynch them in the evenings, and then in the daytime they would don the robes of righteousness. We would take and they would say, you cannot touch me because I am a judge. I did this because I have the right to. As we move forward as a society, we have to establish an open and honest dialogue in each and every single one of our relationships. It doesn't matter whether you are husband and wife, whether you are minister and parishioner, employer or employee. If we do not have that element of truth, we have nothing to build upon. It is the fundamental building block is honesty. I suggest that we all get back to that point, and that we go forward boldly and we say, we're all coming because we have the same story. We're telling you honestly of what these judges have done. I sat down one day with Mike DeWine and John Kasich, who is the Attorney General for the state of Ohio. You know him. Hallelujah. John Kasich was sitting there and he was saying, because I'm going after the impeachment of Justice Maureen O'Connor. I want her ass off the bench. It's not a personal vendetta. It's a necessity vendetta. It's out of a necessity that she has to be removed. Justice Maureen O'Connor took, and when she wrote in her brief, now I have Lori Reisinger as my trial court judge, who had recused herself, turned around and brought herself back into our case. Lori Reisinger said, due to a conflict of interest with Mr. Kinter, I must recuse myself from these matters. They appointed John C. Newland. John C. Newland, I took and found out he had some proclivities. So I purchased the home next to John C. Newland's home. I thought it's only right that you know everything about me. I think that I should know everything about you. We're going to begin this relationship. So I put a 4-foot by 8-foot billboard in his front yard that said, Brian Kinter, child custody coach and practitioner of common sense. The judge decided that he was going to take an action against me for doing that, because apparently you have to have a license to practice common sense. So we kept pressing this, and we take and I go up to Maureen O'Connor and I say, I want Judge Lori Reisinger removed off of the bench, because clearly she's already established that we have a conflict of interest. Justice Maureen O'Connor, she puts together this nice little summary and she exposes all the pious platitudes and alkaloids of what a fantastic job Judge Gilbert did on our case. How Judge Gilbert was beneficial and he had been empathetic and sympathetic to Mr. Kinter, that he actually awarded Mr. Kinter a lot of things, like continuances, access to his children. Here's the problem. Judge Gilbert was never on our case. There's not one court case, not one hearing, not one time did we speak. But yet Justice Maureen O'Connor writes it into the record that this other judge did this fantastic job and that I'm the problem, right? I'm just a disgruntled litigant because I didn't get my way in court, okay? Well, let me tell you, it's not about what I got in court, because what I got in court is a whole lot of education as to the proliferation of the abuse that they can deliver. Then the Lord provided me with the resources to be able to march forward, to be able to continue going and saying that the time is now. The time is for us to stand up, because the court will take and they will beat you down emotionally, financially, spiritually, physically, and in every other realm. Because we have to maintain this precept of the integrity of the judicial system. So when I sat there and Mike DeWine, I had went to him because I was saying there was fraud perpetrated upon the court, through the court, and by the court. Now you have active participants in this nightmare to steal my children. I want my children. Mike DeWine was sitting there and he said, the job of the Attorney General's office is to represent the best interests of the state of Ohio. There's a lot of profound information in that statement. So I asked him, I said, well, who represents the best interests of the people? Who does that? Well, Mr. Kinter, you have to go and get an attorney. An attorney? I've already had 100. I don't need an attorney, I need an account. Today, when Lotus Justice gets up here, she's going to lay out for you and illuminate the two different sides of our judicial process. Whereas we have the balancing of the books here, and we have the ledger that's over here. She's going to put this all out so that each and every single one of us can comprehend exactly what's going on, because she's much more articulate than I. But I'd say that as we go forward, we need the stories, because the greatest story there is your story. You know, I preach a lot up in Urbana and Champaign County and Clark County, and people say that we just can't believe these stories. You know, David in the Bible, can't believe about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being thrown through the fire, okay? Can't believe that Moses walked on the water, okay? Parted the sea. Let me tell you a story. I was dead in sin and dead in my transgressions when my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, went to the cross. And he said that we all have the story. Let's take all those stories, because they have the common theme, to be able to go forward to bring about a change so that we can bring a healing across our nation. That we can set our children free, that our children won't have to face the same mundane ignorance that we've been inflicted with. So in closing here this morning, for me, I want to say that it is a privilege. It is an honor for me to look around and see so many dedicated people that's going to take and say that I'm going to walk right through the pits of hell and we're coming out the other side. We ain't even going to have the smell of smoke, because we're going to leave a legacy for our kids that the United States of America judicial system has now been brought back to its core foundation, where it's predicated upon the truth. Amen. That's where we're at. Hallelujah, hallelujah, and hallelujah. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.